rotations with um, a company in Houston, Texas. Then for my third rotation, I was lucky enough to join Lockheed. So I joined Lockheed in the fall of my senior year, it would have been. Um, I happened to run into a woman at the post office who worked for Lockheed, and she sort of got me in the door. As Chris mentioned, sometimes it's difficult to get in with Lockheed. I got very lucky that I ran into somebody who could help me with that. I did it my co-op as a design co-op. So I did a lot of solid modeling. At the time, it was an old software that Lockheed maintained, very similar to Creo, Troe, whatever Pitt's using right now. When I came back full time, I was part of the analysis group. So I did a lot of stress and dynamics analysis, which was, don't tell the professor this, but way more fun than the dynamics class at Pitt, because you got to see the real life applications. So that was awesome. I really loved that. I love diving into the technical side of things, and seeing the application to what I was working on. That real life connection was, I think, what made the difference for me for this loving stress and dynamics. I did that for 7, 8 years, realized, I really enjoyed the technical side combined with people. I'm an extrovert, so I really wanted to marry the 2. I moved over to project engineering, which is essentially just coordinating all of the technical work. So I kept both hats for a while, did technical work half time and did coordination of technical work. And from there, I moved into a management role. So I started my career supporting Air Force programs. Now I support Navy programs, and I coordinate test analysis and production for a Navy program. So I have technical people that work for me and support the program, and I'm helping make sure that all the roadblocks are removed and that they've got everything they need to succeed.
Awesome. Joe, you want to go up next?
Sure. Yeah, I can take that. So my name is Joseph Javier. I graduated from Pitt with a mechanical engineering degree. I actually applied for an internship at Lockheed numerous times, once every year of undergrad, and I didn't get lucky. I could not land an internship with Lockheed, so I can absolutely understand anyone in this panel or in general who might feel frustrated with, not being able to get their foot in the door. But one of the most things, one of the key parts of that journey is just resilience. Like I said, I applied every year, didn't give up. I felt like I could get better every year and make my resume more impressive. And it paid off senior year when I was able to get hired as a new college hire. So I graduated Pitt 2018, mechanical engineering, then hopped over to King of Prussia on the other side of Pennsylvania and started my career there. I worked there for 5 years as a thermal engineer, um, mostly doing design and analysis in the hypersonics realm of the defense industry. So a lot of that had to do with thermal protection systems, analyzing components, analyzing for flight. And just like Mary Beth, I was able to really fall in love with the craft because I was able to know that what I was doing mattered and also see it happen in person, attending tests or looking through data, or just, more than just a design project that I'm done with at the end of the semester. I can actually know that this is going to go much longer than that. And I've just recently relocated to just outside of Denver, Colorado. Still thermal, but now with more of a focus on deep space. So that's, satellites, rovers, any of the extraterrestrial missions that we're bidding on and winning that you might see in the news, those kinds of things. As I At Pitt, I did have a bit of thermo and fluids research opportunities that helped gear me towards thermal engineering because I just graduated mechanical, but I also made sure to. It was also a bit of a transition when I got hired by Lockheed in becoming more of a specialist in that particular aspect of mechanical. But it's a quick bio.
And I'll hop in and I apologize that I'm still not on camera. I promise I'll get on there before we wrap up. Chris, are you able to throw up the slide that I sent you if it came through? You're on mute currently.
Go ahead, Patrick. Let me see if I can find it.
All right, great. Yeah, so my name is Pat Zarnias. I went to Pitt at the same time as Mary Beth, 2008 to 2012. I am a mechanical engineer. I got my bachelor's in mechanical engineering with a physics minor. As Chris said, I went through the co-op program. I worked a rotation at Schroeder Industries, which is out in Leedsdale, is not too far from Pittsburgh. And then I did a couple of rotations at GE Aviation. Following graduation, I also worked a little short of a year between undergrad and grad school. I worked at Aerotech, which again is a different direction, but not far outside of Pittsburgh. And it's actually where I actually don't know if he's still lecturing at Pitt, but it's where Dr. Ludwig works. So shout out to him. That was a very cool company to work for. I went to Chicago in 2013. I started at Northwestern University for my PhD, again in mechanical engineering. When I was out there, I studied and did computer modeling for radiation damage in metals. Spent some time working at Sandia National Labs here and there with my co-advisor, and graduated. There's some overlap here, but graduated in 2021. So if you were, that's 8 years that it took to get the PhD. So just a just a word to people who are thinking about grad school. Make sure make sure you're really prepared for what it might take. There might be some bumps in the road along the way. Having said that, like I said, there was some overlap. I joined Lockheed Martin Advanced Technology Labs in 2019. So I was there for my last couple of years getting my PhD. And ATL is a little bit different than Lockheed Martin Space, which is where the other two work. We're not associated with one of the business areas. We're associated with corporate, and we're kind of a collection of people with expertise in certain technology areas that are broadly applicable across the corporation. So we get a chance to work with space. We get to work with Aero, RMS, missiles and fire control. So it's a good environment for collaboration, and we hire a lot of PhDs. So if you're thinking about grad school, then this would be a potential destination if you're interested in Lockheed Martin. But my work in particular covers two broad areas. These days I work on advanced packaging for microelectronics. So it's basically figuring out how we can put computer chips together and integrate them into a larger board that ultimately becomes some embedded compute device in a Lockheed Martin platform. So there's a bit more R&D work happening there, and then a little bit more on the applied side. We get the opportunity to package different radio frequency, electronic, and photonic systems such that we can put them on existing Lockheed platforms for usually some kind of demo or showing some new capability or something to a government customer. And I think I mentioned I lived in Chicago when I was at Northwestern. I'm now in South Minneapolis. We've got a small little team of, we've grown. We're about 40 people out here right now, just south of the city.
Awesome. Thank you, Patrick. And you know what? I apologize. I couldn't find the slide, so I'll share that in the group afterwards. But, touching on what you're doing now, as you kind of look back as a student starting out, what do you think was really helpful in your growth as an engineer? Obviously the research, Joseph, you mentioned, and Mary Beth and Patrick, you did co-op, but I think there's a mix of students in this. We have seniors who again are getting ready to graduate, but I do believe we have some sophomores and juniors. But I don't know, what advice, now that you know what you know, what would be your advice for students?
So I can chime in first with some thoughts. So I did research as well on shoulder replacements, actually. So combining biomechanics with what I knew as a straight mechanical engineer. So that was really great too. I think I'd have two pieces of advice. One is explore as many different possible avenues as possible as a student. Right? I learned quickly that while the research was really cool, I did not want to do research all day, right? So I knew I wasn't going to get my PhD like that. That was not my path. I would also say that it's a lot about extracurricular. So right now I'm a hiring manager. If I were to hire somebody right out of school, I wouldn't ask somebody about the technical knowledge that they gained in a class. I might look for soft skills that they learned for how they might teach themselves something new, how they interact with their teammates, et cetera, because that is going to be a skill that I can translate directly to work at Lockheed. Most people are not learning about hypersonics, right? I work in hypersonics too. You're not learning about that when you're in college somewhere. So I would have never been doing the dynamics work that I was doing at Pitt that I then had to do at Lockheed. It's understood that you will learn a lot on the job. So I would say that it's maybe not as much about it's about getting good grades, right? And learning in your class, learning the fundamentals, but a lot of it's about soft skills, right? So are you in a club or organization where you're learning how to work with others? Are you managing a budget on your senior design project, right? If you can talk to some of those less technical skills as part of an interview discussion, sometimes that can demonstrate who you'll be in 5 years and actually is more valuable than straight repeating equations or something more technical.
Yeah, I'll jump in and add to that. Like Mary Beth said, I did do the PhD, and yet still, I started at ATL and pretty much have just been starting from scratch, right? Had to completely relearn a new area of technology that was new to me. And some of the technical work always transfers over that applies to undergrad. I'm currently revisiting some stuff I actually learned in Dr. Ludwig's class back in the day. It applies to the PhD. I'm using modeling and simulation tools that I learned. But really the when you get into a new role, and it's very normal whether at Lockheed or anywhere else, you're not going to know what's going on. You're going to be completely new to the industry, likely new to the technology, and unless you co-opt there or co-opt in the same industry, you're going to have a lot of learning to do. So, don't be afraid to reach out to your your more senior engineers. Don't be afraid to ask questions, because they'll probably be very happy to teach you things, and you'll probably learn a bit quicker that way. And then also adding to that, like Mary Beth said, and I should add a disclaimer. I'm not a manager. I'm not a recruiting person. My title is senior research engineer. But having said that, we look at the technical background is obviously a foundation that you need. But that's not what differentiates. We do want, like Mary Beth said, the soft skills. It's going to be true no matter where you are. It's certainly true in ATL. Our engineers tend to wear multiple hats, as managing projects as well as doing technical work. And so there's a lot of interaction with government customers where you represent the corporation as well as the lab that we're in. So, we don't just want to see, can you solve equations, or do you know can you tell me how the finite element method works, right? We want to know, can you represent us well? Can you explain concepts in a way that are understandable? Are you, do you generally fit well with the office? Are you going to be good to work with? Those kinds of things. Those are very important.
Yeah, I guess to really hammer home the soft skills thing, extracurriculars are a good way to develop team working skills and also to develop your leadership skills. So, for example, like Pitt has the SAE team, you could be someone that goes into the SAE team and you do some sort of solid modeling there, and that gives you that team experience where you have to reach over to different disciplines along with the car. You got your chassis, you got your power, you got, I don't know, the ergo people. And that's a microcosm of working at a big corporation like Lockheed Martin, where you have your own specialty, but you still have to interface with people across disciplines. And it helps you understand that other people have other priorities, and it also helps you understand the importance of, like Patrick said, wearing multiple hats, having a little bit of information about other areas that you may not specialize in, but at least gives you holistic context of your design or your project or your milestones. And on top of that as well, it's nice to get into experiences where you can develop your leadership skills, because Lockheed loves to develop its employees and put them in positions to grow their careers. We have several leadership programs for full-time employees. I think even interns have some sort of small development programs as well. So really just understanding that anybody can be a leader and positioning yourself in such a way that you feel comfortable coming into a company and feeling, that you can change certain things is something that we're looking for, because, you always got to stay ahead and we always want to grow. So it's not just looking for more of the same.
Guys, that's awesome advice. And, you know, in talking to students and seeing a lot of resumes, I think even like the personal projects, right, where a student can show not only their skill set, but also their passion and enthusiasm. Because I think, you know, again, you know, Pat, Joseph, and Mary Beth, they started out just like you guys did, and they, you know, built up their experience. So as you're selling yourself, there's some things that you can pull just from personal experiences, in addition to, I think, you know, what you're experiencing class-wise and as well as, you know, extracurricular. So guys, that's great advice. Um, Getting back to the application process with Lockheed, and again, you know, the three of you might not personally know this, you know, per se as much. I know this is more of a human resource and recruiting question, but you know, Lockheed sees a lot of applicants. I don't know if you can offer any advice on what students should have on a resume, what they shouldn't have on a resume. You know, what tips or tricks, if there are any, that might help applying for, like I said, either a co-op, an internship, or a full-time opportunity? Could you guys offer any insight on that?
Yeah, I can start with that. I would say that, and I don't think this is surprising to anybody, but the way that a lot of large companies work, you apply and there's some automatic filtering that happens, or filtering on the HR side before it even gets to a hiring manager. So I'd say that the thing to focus on first and foremost is making sure that your experiences have buzzwords or keywords from the job description, right? You have to be able to demonstrate that you meet those basic qualifications and those desired qualifications. So if you look at any job posting, there's basic requirements and desired. If you have any of them at all, they need to be in your resume somewhere, right? Because it's somebody that does not necessarily understand the job scope or engineering at all that's going to do the preliminary filtering out, right? So you've got to do your best job without lying, right? It should be real experience, but there are often ways to demonstrate you have a lot of those skills at entry level. So I'd say make sure that those are in your resume. Again, basic qualifications and then desired qualifications. The more of both that you have in your resume, the better chance you stand at getting through the system. Beyond that, I would say make sure that your bullets on your resume, the things that describe what you did, show that you understood what you were doing in your impact, right? So not just thermal analysis, right? Joe's resume probably said thermal analysis to demonstrate improved behavior of blah, 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 right? It showed that he understood why he was doing the work that he was doing. I think that rather than just being a number crunching person, right? If you understand the project that you're working on and you can explain the why, the how, what the impacts are moving forward, that the ability to communicate those things is enormous, because you're going to have to do that every day at your job, to your leader, to your customers, et cetera, at Lockheed. And so I think that those things are valuable. I also love a little personal fact, like if you're a woodworker, right? There's a woman in our office who's a huge woodworker. If we bring her into your interview and then you chat with her casually, we're going to see more of your personality. Maybe you'll be a little bit more relaxed, and then we'll get a feel for if you're going to fit in with the team. I love those personal facts. Again, people are generally more relaxed when they talk about fun facts about themselves. So I think that they're really nice to add to your resume to give a starting point for a more casual discussion during an interview.
Yeah, I'm gonna hop right in and say the same thing. I apologize. You're gonna be seeing now a different. You're not gonna be seeing me on the big screen when I talk because I'm on two devices. But yeah, that part about some kind of fun thing to talk about is a big one. All the technical stuff gets you through the door. It gets you into the interview. But at some point, it's good if somebody can. And this happened with me at ATL. If somebody can look at your resume and be like, "Oh, you bake bread. Like, tell me about that." Right? And that was pre-COVID, by the way. I didn't hop on that bandwagon when everybody else was doing it. But if you can talk about that, then right. It usually like shows passion. It actually gives you a chance to explain something, and they might, if you do a good job of that, it reflects well on you. But it also gives you a chance to connect with people interviewing you in a way that they might look at that and be like, I could work with that guy. So yeah, definitely have something fun on there, a hobby, a project, whatever. Because those discussions are great. And yeah, state fair worthy. And like maybe even more so than the technical stuff. Like in an interview with us, we'll want you to talk through technical things, but also you know, if you're in the room already, we kind of like your technical background already, right? We want to see how, if we can put you in front of a customer or something like that, or throw a curveball at you and see where that goes.
Yeah, I I agree with both of what they just said. So I think just the most important thing in terms of, trying to get a job is to get as much in-person FaceTime as you can. And when you're handing over your resume to somebody and they're looking over it, you want something to catch your eye. So these little fun facts are something that make you unique. They don't have to be technical. Like, well, baking bread is technical, cooking is chemistry, but still, it's not entirely related to the job. So those kinds of things help you stand out, even if, like, I don't know, you may have a bunch of people have 4.0 GPAs, but not everyone has 4.0 GPA in baked bread. So you have these little things that help you stand out, help start the conversation, help get the ball rolling, and that's how they see your personality, and that's how they know whether or not you'd be a good fit. Because, like Patrick said, a lot of times you can look at a resume and pick out one or two things and say, okay, this person's probably capable of handling this kind of work that we do, but is this someone that we want on our team? So you have to sell on top of your skills. You also have to sell your personality. You have to, present yourself as someone that is hireable on the personal and on the technical level. And it can be difficult to display that on a resume. Sometimes resumes can flat out be boring just because it's just all the stuff that like all the technical stuff. So you want to spice it up, maybe change the presentation, the design of it, play with different fonts, different organizations of things, just to, make it more unique and more flavorful and more you. So that is, I guess, what else I can add to what they've already said, because I agree with everything they've said thus far.
Guys, do you recommend that if a student has a portfolio, like to provide that link? Is that something that when you're looking at resumes, does that really stand out to you? I know some companies really utilize them in the recruiting process, others don't. What's your 2 cents on that?
So I think if you meet somebody in person and you get their personal contact information, that's fine to share. Depending, like if you're a design manager, right, you might want to see the design folio that somebody has, or just even understand what they're passionate about, right? If you've got some side projects you worked when you apply to a job, that no portfolios come through. So full disclosure there. If you try to send one through HR, we won't get it. So I would say yes, if there's a personal connection that you've made. I think it could be valuable though.
Yeah, and keep in mind that a lot of the people, like once the resume gets through and maybe gets some more eyes on it, like I've had resumes come to me where the manager, my manager wants an opinion. You might only be skimming through it, right, for high level stuff. You might not have time when you get an email in the middle of the day to click through and really go through a portfolio. So I would emphasize, pick something out of that portfolio, maybe 2 things, and have it listed on the resume. And that's most likely what people are going to notice and want to talk about. So good to have a portfolio, but try to have highlights.
Yeah, I think again, good to have, but I'm thinking of it from a recruiter perspective. They see so many resumes per day, per event, that it's hard not to get inundated. So maybe if it's a situation where you've connected with a recruiter through LinkedIn, or you've developed some sort of personal contact information, like Mary Beth said, then you could send over the full thing to, pitch yourself and make you and increase your profile. So it's definitely good to have, but like Patrick said, you might want to minimize it to the big highlights, kind of like, your resume. You don't want to have a 5-page resume at the event, because they won't be able to get through all that. So you want to just pick out 1 or 2 things that are important. Is it okay to just link an ePortfolio website on the resume? I've seen QR codes on resumes to those kinds of things. I don't know if I'm not a manager, so I don't know how helpful they've been, but I have seen those, and that is a trend. And I don't think it's a negative. I don't know, Mary Beth or Patrick, if you guys have seen QR codes on resumes.
I would say it's not going to hurt you, right? It shows, like if I saw that on a resume, I would say, oh, great, they have put extra work and effort into trying to show off how good of an engineer or an employee they will be. It's probably 30-70 shot that I'm actually going to click the link and I actually spend time going through the portfolio. Again, I'm not a design manager, so that may be a different perspective. To Pat's point, you're really busy during the day, and if you're trying to crank through a bunch of resumes, you may not have time to go deep dive into the portfolio. But if you just having it on your resume, I think is a plus in the pro column there, I'd say.
Awesome. And you know, guys, not to, you know, really just continue to talk about the interview process, but it definitely sounds like Lockheed really looks at the communication, the teamwork, the soft skills like we talked about before, but is there like a whiteboard problem, or, you know, how do you address those, some of the technical competencies? Because, you know, obviously everybody on this call, you know, they want to sell themselves, right? So in addition to what they're doing outside of the coursework or project work, how do you expect an applicant to convey what they can do, or how is that situated in an interview?
Yeah, that's something I was going to touch on, is that like the whiteboard interview, right? We're not doing that, right? It's or at least I can speak for ATL. We're not gonna have a mechanical engineer come in and have them like derive some kind of equations, or you know, sketch up a concept design quickly. That's generally not it. Generally, what we want to see is we'll say, you know, bring a presentation and be prepared to talk about this project that you listed on your resume, or be prepared to talk about your thesis work if you're a PhD, that kind of thing. So on the technical side, yeah, we're not trying to stump people or anything. We want you to come prepared with something that you know, right? Not try and trick you to remember something that you haven't maybe looked at in a year or two. We want you to come prepared, and we want to see how you talk about something with that level of like intimate knowledge and preparation, because that's what you end up doing when you work here, right? Nobody's really throwing curveballs or trying to stump you or anything like that. So yeah, no whiteboard interviews for us.
Yeah, Lockheed interviews aren't a test. It's not something that, you know, you gotta come into like, oh, I don't know what they're gonna ask. Well, you never know what they're gonna ask, but it's not like we're trying to, you know, put you down and find out where you lack and say, oh yeah, we can't take this guy because he couldn't derive like Bernoulli's or something like that. So it's more so of, in terms of the technical thing, just being able to talk to your resume and being able to talk about stuff not on your resume. You know, like Mary Beth said, you have, you know, thermal analysis to analyze this component and figure out if it could clear these temperatures or something like that. But, you know, that's just one bullet on your thing. So if someone's, or a couple bullets, but if someone sees that and wants to know more, then you should be able to talk about the full story. You know, maybe this was a months-long project and there are things that you couldn't list on there, but you can give more context to. So as far as being able to show off your technical know-how and, you know, everything, all the classes that you've taken thus far, you just want to be able to talk to that and talk well to that.
Yeah, and I would say on top of that, you can, if you have a passion that you want to pursue, maybe more than others, often at the interview, you'll get asked to introduce yourself, right? So you can say, I'm Mary Beth, I go to Pitt, I've done these co-ops, my favorite classes have been, right? And then that might open the door for questions about that class and why you liked it. So you can really demonstrate a passion for something. That can also come across in a project that you worked. I would say it all ties back to communication skills and demonstrating a technical understanding, right? So for ATL, Pat mentioned they might ask you to bring a presentation about a project you worked in. At least in space, I haven't seen anybody ask for a technical presentation, but you should be able to talk to a technical project as if you had a presentation in front of you. Maybe not 10 slides, right? Maybe 2 high-level slides worth of talking, but you should be able to communicate the why, the how, future state of something technical that you worked on. But again, we are not doing, the Pat's point, whiteboard or trying to trip you up, right? It's only going to be about things that you know about and have worked on already.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you, guys. Well, and you know, Lockheed, I joke around, especially with Mary Beth, because, you know, we're always trying to make the connection with our Pitt engineers to our alums, because, you know, Lockheed doesn't have to come to career fairs most of the time, right? Their applicant base is just always strong. But I think, like Joseph mentioned, you know, taking advantage of some of the national conferences with NSBE and SWE and some of the other student organizations, if you can, is a great way to make a connection with some of the bigger companies and the really popular companies as well too. So Joseph, I'm glad you kind of mentioned that, because It's something that, you know, we definitely promote to our students to take advantage of if they can. Guys, I wanted to open the floor to our participants so that they can ask direct questions. So guys, please don't be shy. You have 3 people that are the most helpful and, you know, want to, you know, promote Lockheed too. So you can unmic if you want to put something in a chat to ask that you're curious about. Now is the time to do it. So please feel free. If there's anybody that, like I said, wants to talk to them about their roles, talk to them about the recruiting process. Guys, are you hiring in your areas, particularly for internships and co-ops and full-time?
Yeah. Oh, I'm getting an echo now. Let's switch back to the phone. I was being too ambitious.
We don't have an echo from you, Pat, just for the record.
Well, I do.
It's only on your
It's like
side.
having a speech.
Yeah.
It's like having a speech jammer going. Yeah, no, we are generally hiring. I think I mentioned when I started at ATL 4 years ago, we were 20-ish people here in Eagan, Minneapolis, and these days we're about 40 and still hiring as far as I know. Like I can't speak to what recs are out there right now. You can go look them up on the website. But I do know that with that, you know, our mechanicals are spread pretty thin. So I guess, you know, keep an eye out to see if anything opens up there, assuming that we're talking to a good number of mechanicals.
Yeah, Lockheed's always hiring. My particular team, I don't know if we are hiring, but Colorado in general is a huge aerospace destination. And it's one of our biggest plants for Lockheed. So there's absolutely so many interns and full-time hires coming through. One of the questions in the chat, is it more difficult to start full-time without previous experience? Well, what I can say from my experience with not having a co-op or internship at LM and coming in as a new hire is I don't think that significantly impacted me. I think a lot of people were very welcoming and very helpful with anything that I had questions about. So the only thing that I can say is that when you land an internship at Lockheed, they usually try to bring you back and transition you into a full-time. So it's very helpful to land an internship because you've already got one foot in the door towards full-time employment, because they're going to try to bring you back as long as you're successful every summer. But in terms of the comparison between the two and your job performance, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal or that big of an inconvenience.
Yeah, I would agree with Joseph there. It doesn't matter where you worked or where you came from before you start at Lockheed. The team will help get you up to speed. I would say that it's like, obviously, if you have an internship or co-op, like Joseph mentioned, you are very likely to transition to a full-time job if you want to stay with Lockheed. We try to have almost 100% retention of our interns and co-ops because we've put time into developing skill sets. In relation to the one comment, we put interns in for clearances often. So if you receive an active security clearance, we're more likely to want to retain you because that takes a long time, and that is a very valuable feature of a candidate to have for certain applications. So I would say that if you're in the door, it's helpful, but it certainly will not be a showstopper, especially with how many openings we have across space right now. Anyway, I know that the Colorado office that Joseph mentioned, we have a ton of openings right now. There are going to be more coming for our King of Prussia office in Eastern Pennsylvania. They have decided to relocate a lot of Navy manufacturing to that office, so there is going to be a big influx in openings there at all levels, entry level up through experienced. I would say that for Jack's question about how many applications for a typical opening, there are probably hundreds per opening. The hiring manager typically sees no more than 20 at a time, just information overload and trying to process who's eligible and who's not. So that it can be very competitive on that end.
Guys, there was a question about, is US citizenship a requirement? Is it?
So I'll say blanket no. However, for any job that requires a security clearance or may use a security clearance, it is a requirement. we're not allowed to, only HR can ask if you are a US citizen, so that we can't ask that if we're having a casual conversation. But for example, anything in my group requires a security clearance, so you would have to be a US citizen. And that's generally, if you're curious, if US citizenship is required, it will generally say it on the job posting, or it will say that a security clearance is desired, which is an indication that a US citizenship is necessary.
You want to fold that into Mark's question about security clearances in the chat?
Oh yeah, so how do you get such a thing? So you, in order to get a security clearance, you have to have a need for a security clearance, which means that you've been assigned to a project or a group of projects that requires a security clearance. So you cannot just walk off the street and get a security clearance. You have to be sponsored by a government contract. So unfortunately, you have to be working for a company that would require you to have a security clearance already. So the three of us on this call all have a security clearance because we all worked projects or are potentially working projects that would require that clearance. We could not have gotten it without that.
Yeah, and guys, that's why I think applying early is key as well, because, you know, like Lockheed, well, there's other organizations like the National Security Agency, Bechtel Bettis, like there's certain areas where, like Mary Beth said, you have to have one. And sometimes that can take up to 6 to 8 months to process. Even more, right? Yeah. So it's, you know, that's something that, you know, we don't want you to think like, oh my gosh, because I don't have this, I'm not going to be considered. But just understand though that, you know, it is a bonus. Like obviously if there's somebody military, right, who has some clearances, that's probably going to push their resume up to the top of the pile because of their background. But it's not going to deter you that you shouldn't apply or that, you know, you will be considered. It just might be a bonus. That's all.
Yeah,
So.
that pretty much answers Annabella's question. If you do have a security clearance, it would absolutely be a bonus because one, that's money that the company doesn't have to spend getting you one, and two, you can start on high level projects much more immediate rather than having to do that 6 to 8 month wait like you mentioned.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. Having the clearance is nice. It's certainly a plus in your application, but consider that if you're, you know, relatively new out of school applying to the job, most people probably, I don't know, maybe Mary Beth would know different, but I would expect that most people might not have a clearance unless they interned or co-opted at a defense company that they already have one for that reason. Otherwise, you're probably competing against a bunch of people who don't have it. And the people hiring understand that. You're not just going to come in and start working with sensitive material right away. There's an onboarding period that takes quite a while.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I
right.
did not have one. Oh, sorry. I did not
Yeah,
have
no,
one
none of
when I
us did
graduated, so.
actually. None of us had one when we started. I would say that our office in King of Prussia often pairs with Drexel University for co-ops, unfortunately. But there are, let's say, I think I got 130 some resumes for a position last year, and there were maybe 5 people with clearances, and they had all previously worked at Lockheed. So it's very rare that somebody would come in entry level with a security clearance. All right, so how big are your teams and or departments? So for my immediate team, it's about 12 of us in terms of my employees, but we work with a larger program that is over 100 people, closer to 200 at this point. So it's I don't know, the way I always describe the King of Prussia office, which is where Joseph started, is it has more of a family feel. Like everyone sort of knows each other when you walk in the hallways. I know who has a dog, who has a child, right? It's a very family feel, even though it's a couple hundred people, and you're a couple hundred people in 100,000 person company, right? So there are different levels of like team and how you're fitting in with everybody else. So my team, 12 people, my program, 100 to 200 people, and then our site, 500 plus people, right? And then overall, Lockheed is 100,000 employees. So it varies on where you are and what your group are. So I'm sure Joseph and Patrick can describe different situations.
Yeah, it's certainly different at ATL. I will say you can spot who has kids walking through the hall because they're going to be the ones looking more tired than everybody else. But yeah, so I'm in a part of a lab. We're called SSL North. It's, like I said, about 40 of us here, just outside Minneapolis. Our lab as a whole, SSL, is about 80 people these days. And then we fit into Lockheed Martin's Advanced Technology Labs, which is, I think, pushing 300 people these days. And they're headquartered out in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. There isn't really like a broader business area organization around that. We're part of corporate, but the ladder up to the chief technical officer is pretty short for how we're nested into the corporation. So it's a pretty small group. We all tend to, I mean, certainly here in Egan, we all know each other. Although there's a lot of new faces to learn these days. And we also get but it feels a bit larger than what it is, because we get the chance to interface with people across the corporation so very often. We have technical groups that meet that cut across the business areas. We talk about the programs we're working on. We talk about research, things like that. I will add, there's another part about teams. So what I just described was, our lab is 80 people, ATL's 300. Teams for projects, though, it's pretty pretty dynamic. You might have, depending on the size of the project, you might have 3 people on some kind of small internal R&D effort. You might have a dozen people working on a larger customer research R&D effort. It really varies. And it's one of the cool things about ATL, which is, the teams kind of get put together based on your expertise and what's needed on a particular project. So we get to, you're not just working with the same, 10 people every single day, every single project. We get the chance to collaborate with different people all the time. It's nice.
Yeah, I guess the closest thing, well, not the closest thing, but what I consider the team is just who, like, your manager that you report to, and then everyone else that also reports to that manager. So for me, that's probably about like 15 people. But in terms of your working teams or your working projects, that can vary, like Pat said, based on whatever you've got going on in terms of projects, contracts. So you could be on a team, like you said, R&D, where it's just one. I've been on that, small efforts where it's just like me and 2 other people, or you could be on teams of 100 or more. And so it really depends on the effort and what's being undertaken.
Thanks, guys. There's a point about asking how to integrate some of your personal interests, on your resume without being unprofessional. And I see that like a lot of times with activities, you can incorporate that into that type of resume section. But some people will even just list interests on the bottom. And, I don't even think you really even need to possibly list it per se, but if you want to incorporate it in your interview, then that's a great way to be able to do it. So I understand what the student's asking, like you don't want it to be like an unprofessional section, but you don't have to go into tons of detail about it. So I hope that makes sense. Great question.
Yeah,
about...
if I could,
Oh, go ahead.
If I could jump in real quick. I think anybody kind of turn their nose up and be like, oh, you're into bread, or thinking of a recent applicant like, oh, you're into cars and you took ballet, which is the same person. Like if anybody's going to turn their nose up at that, maybe you don't want to work in that group, right? I don't know. It doesn't, they sound like it might be a little bit toxic to work with. It's certainly not a good sign. I think put things on there that are, that you genuinely enjoy, and people probably would just want to talk about them, right? Because it's to some extent, an interview is just a conversation, or if it goes well, it should just, get to some point. Yeah. Boy, I feel like I had one more. But do filter, right? Don't just put out, like, don't just think, what do I like to do with my day or my evenings, and just put everything on. Definitely filter a little bit. Like bread making, you can talk about some of the technical details, or, dancing, you can talk about, how long you've been doing it, and some of the physical demands or whatever. Don't list on your resume that, like, I like to play Valorant at night or something like that, right? Like, filter a little bit.
On that note, though, it is important to remember that every interview or conversation with a recruiter is a 2-way street. They're looking to see if you're a right fit for them, and you should remember to consider whether or not they're a right fit for you. We're here promoting Lockheed, but if you have, God forbid, a nasty experience with a recruiter that turns you off to Lockheed, you shouldn't be afraid to walk away and say, hey, I don't think this is the right fit for me. So like you said, if you put some things on your resume and someone turns their nose up at it, like, oh, why would you put that? We're a defense company. We don't care about your cars, ballet, or bread. Then, that's also a red flag for you to take into account.
Yeah, guys, that's great advice. great question here to follow up. Can you speak to advantages, drawbacks you feel for such a large company? Like, what's a pro and what's a con?
I think for me,
So I,
oh, go ahead.
go ahead, Joseph. No, go ahead.
All right. I think for me, one pro is the amount of opportunities that you have. So, for example, like I said in my intro, I just recently relocated to just south of Denver, Colorado, and I'm still within thermal engineering. So, just even within this very niche aspect of mechanical engineering, I've been able to make it basically 2/3 the way across the country and do something completely different. And, if I were to transition like Mary Beth did from uh, mechanical to more project management, that could open up even more avenues of more opportunities, and different projects, interact with different people in different companies, like contractors, and do other things like that. So that's one huge advantage. I think there's just so much opportunity to grow. If you get bored, you can find something else to do within the company, no problem. One drawback that I would say is on some of those bigger projects, you might have communication issues because you're working with so many different people that may not even be in the same city as you. You may have a call with someone who's in California and you're on the East Coast, and you have to talk about certain things. Times can get a bit difficult. Sometimes you're waiting a little bit because there's someone that you don't know personally on the other side of the country that's doing something that's holding you up. So those are just like a little bit of growing pains. But overall, I think everyone at Lockheed wants to get the job done. So that's not a terrible con to have.
Yeah, I'll jump in
And
there
I'd-
from the, go ahead.
So I've got a couple. One, I'd say that the benefits working for a larger company are generally very good. They are changing our PTO policy, but as of right today, we can bank up to 400 hours of vacation time, which is unheard of. And that's going to 250 hours, right? You can roll that over. You can roll over that many hours every year. And other companies, you can't even roll over a week, let's say. So I'd say that there are huge benefits with on the benefit side working for a large company. So to Ezra's question that Joseph just answered, does Lockheed have a tuition assistance program? Yes. So Joseph did his master's at Villanova. I did my master's at Villanova. They have a set amount per year, depending on if you're getting a technical degree or non-technical, but that's a pro of working for a large company. I'd say that for me, in my office, it feels like a small company with all the benefits of a large company, but you are one person out of 100,000, right? So and maybe Pat has different experiences, but if in his office, he wants to make a change, maybe it's easier because it's only 40 to 80 people in that office. Or if you're working for a small consulting firm that's only 100 people, right? You might be able to make more change overall to the company than we can at Lockheed, being such a huge company. So I would say pros and cons of both, but so far nothing that has deterred me right from leaving Lockheed. To Joseph's point, there are a ton of opportunities, ton of leadership development programs within the company to help you keep finding your best fit within the corporation.
Yeah, and I'll add to the pros. Like I keep saying, we're a pretty small group out here. But being a part of Lockheed and having that Lockheed Martin name and email address, when we're reaching out to vendors or subcontractors or whatever, they generally want to work with us. It's a nice perk to have the combinations of like a smaller company's culture, at least for a local site, in many ways, but also have kind of the sway of a larger company. Let's see, I think we have some new. There was a question about tuition assistance. I think Mary Beth and Joseph covered it, but I will add that if you're thinking about doing a PhD, we have at least 3 people at the moment, and it's a very regular thing within ATL that we'll have people who figure out how to fit their PhD work into their work here at Lockheed Martin. We have a guy doing his PhD right now on hypersonics, so he spends a lot of his time at the University of Minnesota. It's kind of woven into his Lockheed Martin work. So Lockheed both helps with the tuition assistance, but also just speaking for our organization in particular, we're very flexible if you want to pursue an advanced degree, and we want that because we want people who are going to go out and have some research passion that they're going to push that will help the organization as a whole to maybe push into a new area. So it's encouraged.
Awesome, guys. I'm trying to read through some of the final questions here. The company culture and what sort of personal qualities the company's looking for. I don't know if you guys want to, one just wants to take that just real quick.
So I can tell you the question that I ask that often is the most telling about personalities. It's tell me about a time you had a communication issue and what you did to resolve it. Because I am looking for, did you take ownership of that communication issue? Did you blame your teammates? Did you work with your teammates to resolve it, right? How did you go about fixing that problem? How you answer that is likely indicative of what kind of team player you're going to be in the future. I'm sure I asked Joseph that question. It's one of my favorites to ask because, again, it points to how well you're going to be able to work with others, which is honestly sometimes the biggest trait, right? Your technical skills you're going to learn on the job. So it's again, going back to those soft skills. It's how you're going to contribute and be a team player, right? Nobody does anything on their own. In most cases at Lockheed, it's collaborative. But really quick answer, that's what I would say. Being able to demonstrate that teamwork with others.
That's another question. It's a good one. Are you typically involved in the full scope of company projects in a broad sense? Or are you typically involved in and aware of only your like specific aspect?
You know, I can, speaking for us, I think we have certain technical areas that we're well aware of. And I generally know what's going on there, you know, across ATL, across the corporation with different groups, but kind of only just that tech area. I couldn't tell you much about what Mary Beth's doing or what Joseph is doing. And that's just kind of a side effect of such a large company. It's impossible to keep track of everything that's going on across the corporation. But there is, like I said, there's a good amount of technical communities that will meet up regularly to share what they're doing, you know, share business pursuits or opportunities, that kind of thing. So it kind of depends on what community you land in, but there are opportunities for that to get more involved broadly.
Awesome. Well, listen, guys, I know we just have like 3 more minutes here, but I can't thank you enough for your time today. I mean, it was number one, great to see you, but number two, really the advice and I think just the input that you gave was so helpful. Even for me to be able to kind of understand the ins and outs, you know, of a company like Lockheed. Students, thank you so much for participating as well too. I know everybody's busy. Everybody have a great weekend. And again, if anybody needs to make any connections or has any additional questions, just reach out to me. Okay? You guys rock. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for all the
Thanks, Chris.
questions.
Yeah, they were good questions.